My student became my roommate and then my F-buddy, MF. This is my account of something that happened a few years ago. It's mostly true except for some of the dialogue that I had to reconstruct to the best of my memory, contrary to what everyone else on here claims. No one is remembering exact dialogue years later, haha. Right out of college I got a job teaching high school. I was 22 years old and teaching kids who were 14 to 18. It was a great job. I love teaching and I'm pretty good at it. But I was advised early on to be very wary with female students. The small age gap between me and my students, coupled with the fact that I was single, could spell danger. Overall, I was professional with all my students. I had to be in order to get them to take a younger teacher seriously. As a human male, I couldn't help but notice if a girl was conventionally pretty, but I made it a point to never let my thoughts drift any further than that. Long story short, I taught high school for a few years, but like many people, I got sick of the administration, the politics, and the stress. I left teaching to go back to grad school. I got my master's and then decided to start a PhD. To my surprise, in my first year of my PhD program, Jenny, one of my former students, started going to the same school doing a master's. When I started teaching, she was a junior, so I knew her for 2 years before she graduated. She always struck me as reserved, but opinionated and confident. We were in the same department and ended up having a couple classes together. It was strange for her to talk to me and not call me Mr. N, but she quickly got over that and became fairly friendly with each other. We would meet up for lunch every now and then and I'd advise her on what courses to take and how to apply for PhD programs. The program I was in places a ton of emphasis on language acquisition as a means to further your research abilities. It's basically an expectation that you'll spend a summer or even a year overseas fully immersing yourself in language. The summer after my first year in the PhD program I decided to spend a couple months in Seville, particularly because my university has a close relationship with the university there and costs for housing would be significantly cheaper. I arrived in Seville and after a bit of trouble figuring it all out, found where I'd be staying. It was a small dorm building, just 3 floors, with each floor having a common area with a bathroom and kitchen surrounded by 6 small bedrooms. Because it was summer, the entire building was vacant when I got there, which was a bit of a relief. It was nice to have some quiet solitude to relax in. Those who have done grad school understand the importance of de-stressing. After a week, though, I woke up to the sound of one of the university administrators in the common area. She must have been showing a new student the dorms. I got dressed and poked my head out of my room and to my surprise, it was Jenny. The administrator was showing her and another woman I didn't recognize in the dorms. I jumped out to greet them, with Jenny apparently being as surprised as I was. Apparently she had plans to go to South America but they fell through and she ended up in Seville as well. As much as I appreciated the solitude, a friendly face in a foreign land is always a welcome sight. I had to go out to one of the library archives that day, but when I came back in the late afternoon, I found Jenny and the other girl, Grace, sitting in the common area drinking tea. I sat with them and chatted a bit before the 3 of us decided to go out and get a late evening dinner. While we were walking, Jenny began to joke about the 2 of them ruining the privacy I had for the previous week. I guess you have to stop bringing women back to the dorm room every night now that you're not alone, she said with a teasing smile. That joke caught me off guard. Although we'd gotten to be pretty good friends over the course of the past year, our conversations never veered away from academia and research. Yeah, you know me, a different girl every night, I joked back. Again, for those who have done grad school, you understand how the vast majority of us spend more time with books than we do with intimate partners. She didn't say anything else about it, but her broaching the topic stayed in my mind for a bit. I hadn't met anyone and certainly hadn't brought anyone back to the dorm in the week I've been here, but I had masturbated in the privacy of my room, and now I just have to be a bit more discreet about it. After the 3 of us ate and spent some time walking around the city center, we headed back to the dorm building. I changed into my pajama pants and undershirt to sleep in and headed out of my room to use the bathroom. Grace's door was closed, but Jenny was in the kitchen filling up a cup of water. She was wearing short cotton shorts and a tank top. To be honest, I'd never really thought of her sexually, but the sight in front of me was not unwelcome. I think she must have noticed my eyes wandering just a bit because she caught my eye and we both shared an awkward smile as I scooted past her on the way to the bathroom. The next morning I woke up to a message on the new group chat the 3 of us had made the night before to ease communication. Grace messaged to let us know that she headed out early to meet a friend of hers who lived nearby. I groggily rolled out of bed and went to the bathroom. By the time I was out, I saw Jenny in the kitchen making some coffee. She offered to make me some and I gladly accepted. We sat across from each other in the common area as we chatted. She was in the same tank top and shorts from last night, with her hair up in a ponytail. So what are your plans for today? She asked. Well, I was going to bring a ton of women back to the dorm like I've been doing daily, but now that you guys are here, that's off the table, I replied sarcastically. She laughed heartily. I know you're joking but I also wouldn't even be surprised. I laughed it off and ignored what she was implying. Maybe being away from school and home was causing her to be more carefree. I didn't mind, it was just a new side of her I wasn't used to. Over the next few days we settled into routines. We usually all met up for dinner and hung out until late at night. Mornings start late in Spain, which was a nice change. One morning I woke up and to be frank, was atrony. I hadn't masturbated since the girls had shown up. Although I locked my room door, I still felt uncomfortable with them being so close. But this morning I just had that undeniable urge. I started to touch myself, with cliché fantasies running through my head. But halfway through, I started to hear a faint sound. A light buzzing. I thought maybe it was something like an air conditioner, but that wasn't the sound the AC in this building makes. It took me a second, but I realized the sound was coming from directly on the other side of the wall. Jenny's room. I realized. She must be using a vibrator. She must not realize that the sound of it could barely be heard through the wall. I was simultaneously surprised and turned on. It didn't take me long to finish myself off, and I grabbed a towel to clean myself up. I got up and ran over to the shower while making sure the common area was empty. By the time I came out of the bathroom, I saw Jenny was now in the common area drinking coffee on the couch. "Hey, good morning, how's it going?" she asked. I was having trouble looking her in the eye, knowing what I heard earlier. "I'm alright. Are you having a good morning?" "Yup." She responded perkily. I don't know what got into me at this point. What I said next was so out of character for me that I'm still shocked I ever said it. "Yeah, I heard." I was standing in the doorway of my room and waited just long enough to close the door to see the look of understanding dawn on her face. I was freaked out that I had been inappropriate or creepy, so I waited in my room until I could tell she had left for the day. Part of me was proud for being bold in response to the teasing she had doled out earlier, and part of me was worried I was being a creepy older man. Later that evening the three of us met up for dinner again at a small restaurant down the street. There was a guitarist playing outside and the sound of his music filled the street. "I love the sound of Spanish guitar," Jenny said. "I'm sure you'd still be able to hear from the dorm, especially with how thin the walls apparently are," Grace replied with a smirk. Jenny shot her an embarrassed look and slapped her shoulder. Okay, apparently she had told Grace about what happened this morning. Grace simply laughed at her. "Oh, relax, it's normal." She turned to me. "If you ever hear any sounds from my room, just do your best to ignore it." Jenny and I broke out into laughter. Grace was more outgoing than either of us are, so it was nice to have someone break the ice and ease the tension I was worried about. When we got back to the dorms, it was late and we each headed straight to our rooms. I laid in bed, unable to sleep. I was undeniably turned on. I can't pretend like the two women I was sharing this space with weren't both SI. Although I had taken care of myself earlier in the day, I felt the urge again and began to touch myself. A few minutes later, I got a ding on my phone. It was Grace on the group chat. "Whichever of you is having some special time right now, please keep it down. Holy poop. My student became my roommate and then my F-buddy, holy poop. I didn't even know I was making any sound at all. Can she hear my deeper breathing through the wall?" A few seconds later another message. "Just kidding. You're both so easy to F with." The emotional roller coaster was unaliving me. Ding. It was Jenny this time. "You had me scared for a second. I thought I was being quiet." Whoa. I was in disbelief. Ding. Grace again. "Get it, girl. Sorry to interrupt." "No worries." At this point I was just staring at my phone in disbelief. Another message from Grace. No messages from Dan. He's either too busy with himself or fast asleep. It took me a bit to compose myself and conjure up the courage to respond. "Not asleep," was all I replied. A few seconds later, I heard the buzzing again. But louder. Jenny wasn't making any effort to muffle the sound this time. I began to stroke myself again. This time not even trying to not think about the two women I was sharing a floor with. I orgasmed and then tried to quietly make my way to the bathroom to clean up before getting back in bed. When I got back to my room there were new messages. "Grace, I guess that means Dan is done." "Jenny, poor guy, needs to clean up." My head was spinning. I couldn't believe what just happened. I laid in bed with my thoughts racing until I fell asleep. From that night, things were different. No, it wasn't a constant orgy among the three of us. But the jokes and the sneaky glances got bolder. I could hear Jenny's vibrator more often now. Grace would joke at the end of the night about needing to run into her room to take care of herself. Things like that. One night a few days later the three of us were in the common area drinking tea. Jenny got up to go to bed and Grace teased her with another one of her jokes that pushed the boundary ever so slightly. "Don't worry about being too loud. We can handle it," Jenny laughed. "Not a problem anyways, my batteries died and I need to get new ones." "Aw, you can always borrow mine." She paused for a second. "Or just borrow Dan." Okay, maybe this time Grace pushed too far. An awkward silence fell on the three of us. I couldn't believe what Grace had just said. I couldn't believe that Jenny was standing there silently looking at the two of us. Our eyes met. I couldn't deny I wanted it. I have ever since I saw her in a tank top and shorts and my mind began to wander. Grace got up, grabbed me by the hand, and walked over to Jenny. "The intimate tension between you two is obnoxious. Go bang it out," she said with a laugh. She grabbed Jenny as well and led us to Jenny's room, making a big show out of pushing us into the room. We stood at the foot of her bed and looked out to the common area at Grace, silently. I walked over to the door and closed it. No words needed to be said. Jenny sat back onto her bed and I leaned in to kiss her. She laid back as I got on top of her, my body straddling hers as we kissed fiercely. She was wearing a short skirt and I ran a hand up her thigh. I hesitated a moment at the hem of her skirt and she grabbed my hand and pulled it up to her covered wimp. I started to rub her through the thin fabric as she reached for the bulge in my jeans. She moaned as I touched her. I could feel how wet she was and slipped her panties to the side so I could properly touch her wimp. Her moans immediately got louder. I realized, it was both to show me how turned on she was, and also so that Grace could hear. I couldn't believe what was happening. A few years ago she was my student. Then she became a classmate. Now she's underneath me, her clothes coming off one by one as I tease her CLT. I got off her momentarily so I could strip myself naked. She pulled her top off exposing the most perfect breasts. She's not huge by any stretch, but perfectly sized for me to cup her TTS in my hands. When my PP popped out of my boxers, she immediately reached for it, stroking it and rubbing her thumb along the underside of my head. I tried to work my way down her body so I could taste her wimp, but she held on tight to my PP. No. Just F me, please Mr. N. She hadn't called me that since starting grad school. I could see a whole different side of her was coming out.
I don't have a CNDM, I started to say.
I'm on birth control. I need it, she replied. The intensity in her voice told me to take her seriously. I had no doubt Grace could hear every word being said on the other side of the door. I flipped us around so I was on my back and she was straddling me. She stroked my PP for a few seconds while I played with her nipples. She lifted her hips slightly to allow me room. I felt my head slip past her lips. It took all my willpower to not grab her by the hips and push all the way into her. Instead, she slowly lowered herself onto me, the moan escaping her lips getting louder as she took all of me. I took a moment to appreciate the scene in front of me. Jenny, a beautiful, SI woman, entirely bare, her skin glistening with a thin layer of sweat. Her TTS swayed as she began to rock back and forth on me. I reached up for her TTS and lightly pinched her nipples. I won't last long, I warned her. I don't want you to, was her response. She leaned forward to kiss me and began to gyrate her hips back and forth on me. She was so tight there was no hope of me holding out. Within seconds I grabbed her SS and pulled her hips down onto me so I was fully inside her. Give it to me, she whispered in my ear as I exploded deep inside her. I could feel her wimp spasming with her own orgasm as I filled her with my CM. She collapsed on top of me, exhausted as we both came down from our orgasms. A few minutes later we were still laying together, her on top of me with my softening PP still inside her. We heard a ding come from Jenny's phone. It was Grace on the group chat. Jealous. What is your biggest rated R mess up in the bedroom? Last night my girlfriend decided to talk dirty during intimacy. It was a breakthrough for us in the bedroom. My girlfriend has been insecure about talking in the bedroom since the beginning of our relationship because she's not fluent in English. She usually avoids saying anything mid-deed other than mumbling, which I appreciate too, but I've always wanted to hear her say something hot in the heat of the moment, even if she said something nasty in her native language. I never put pressure on her to do anything that made her uncomfortable, but I did tell her how much I would enjoy hearing things come out of her mouth when we sleep together. She didn't budge though. The thought of talking made her cringe. I eventually accepted the fact that she was obviously not the talking dirty type, which was okay. However, last night happened. My girlfriend came home from an office party and I could tell she was tipsy. She hugged me and said she was prepared to talk dirty if I promised not to laugh. I instantly promised not to laugh. Cue foreplay. I was going down on her when she said she wanted me to reach home base. Sweet. Good opening line for an inexperienced talker. I was impressed. Mid-deed, she kissed me and said you're within me now. I asked if she liked it. She nodded and said you're so far within me now. I was struggling not to break my promise and burst out laughing when I realized she was recycling the same line. When I went to go down again, I said I love the taste. She said cool, thank you. Now work on me like I was a horse in the field and treat me like a saddle. I was afraid she was gonna catch me trying not to laugh. My girlfriend said I can feel you behind my belly button. At that moment, I lost it and laughed. My girlfriend had no idea what was so funny about what she said. I apologized for laughing and said it was the most unique talk I've ever heard and that I loved her even more for giving me that experience. Nothing I said made her less upset about me laughing though. Based on her body language, I'm gonna have to do a lot of exceptionally good boyfriend things before I see her unclothed again. After a decade of marriage, what was the worst wedding anniversary ever? Yesterday was our 10-year anniversary. I brought flowers to my wife's office, and I found her with some guy nuzzling her neck and giggling. My wife and I were married 10 years ago yesterday. She has been working on a big project for the last few months. For the last 4 weeks or so, she has been putting in extra time, staying late and going in early, to meet her deadline. She tells me this is a career maker for her. I work in construction. With the rain we have had, we worked crazy hours trying to make up for the time we missed. So, I work 12 hours on the days the weather's nice, and sometimes a little longer. If it's raining when I get up, I don't go in. Some days we get sent home when it starts pouring because it's too dangerous. I usually hit the gym for an hour or two. On Thursday, we started at 6 a.m. mid-morning, and then it started to rain hard. We went home. I went to the gym as usual and decided to cut the workout short and head downtown to see my wife, Megan. I wanted to give her flowers and make plans for dinner that night if at all possible. We really haven't seen much of each other this week. I went to bed at about 9 p.m. and she still wasn't home. She called earlier and said she was again working late. Not unusual for the past month. I stopped, got some flowers, and went into her building at about 12:30. Nicole was at the receptionist's desk. I asked her if, since I got here later than I wanted, she would put the flowers on Megan's desk. She said, I don't think they went to lunch yet. Why not drop them off yourself? She buzzed the door to get back to the offices. The place was deserted. I went to her office, and the door was closed. I always walk in unless the receptionist tells me she is in a meeting. I walk in, and some guy is standing behind her, nuzzling her neck. She is reaching back over his head. She is giggling as she is saying, we've got to get this done. I am gut punched. I slammed the flowers down, said happy anniversary, and walked out. I didn't hear what she said. I just went past Nicole, said goodbye, and left. I made it to the elevators and out of the building, then my phone started ringing. I bawled my eyes out all the way home. I went into the garage, pulled my camping gear out of the rafters, and took off. I drove about 2 hours to a state park. I had no idea what to do. I just had to run. I hiked a trail we have been on in the past. It was about a 3-hour hike. I don't drink much, so I had no booze. I just sat there, thinking. Looking back, I am glad I was in a rush. Normally, I bring a .45 with me camping. We have black bears, which generally scare us off but get aggressive if cubs are around. The way I was feeling, I might have eaten the barrel that night. I turned off my phone because Megan was bombarding me with calls. I left the park to get reception and turned it on to see my good friend calling. I called him back. He said Megan called him to check on me and make sure I didn't do anything stupid. We talked a bit, and I told him I had to think this through and would catch up on Friday. So, while I am thinking about this, I go over our marriage from the beginning to see what I missed. We come from completely opposite backgrounds. My grandfather raised me with my mom. He taught me about life. He had a little saying about everything. He told me marriage would be the hardest job I'd ever have. You had to work on it every day. God, I miss him. We did not have much, but we heard Mom and Grandpa having many discussions about bills. They worked hard, and my brother and I did not miss out on anything we knew of. Megan was born into money. Not overly rich, but very comfortable. She went to a great college, always had nice clothes, a new car, etc., and she is beautiful. She's an 11/10. We met, hit it off, and began dating. I was dumbfounded at how such a woman would ever be with me. We dated quite a while before she told me about her parents and her lifestyle. Our friends called us the model couple because they thought we were so good looking we had to be models. Her family was not as kind, afraid that economic differences would come into play. Her dad and I started to get along, but her mom took some convincing. She graduates, gets her first job, and we plan on getting married. We agreed between us that we would expose each other to the lives that we lead. I took her whitewater rafting, she took me to the symphony, we went ziplining, we went to an art opening, etc. We agreed we had to experience each other's interests. She was really enthused about the more physical things we did. I kind of like the symphony and such. I even own 2 tuxes now. I look back and do not see any red flags. In her first 2 jobs, she quit because the men all tried to get in her pants. She was paraded out in front for photo ops and invited to conferences when other newbies were not. At dinner at a conference, a partner tried to get her drunk, then tried to force himself into a room that night. She quit. The next job was the same, and she quit again. This third job is women as some of the partners, and none of that crap happens in her workplace. She seems very happy. We seemed very happy. So now, on Friday, I am home. I called her. I asked where she was. She was back at work. I, being the smart mouth that I was, said that the marriage was taking second place to her job. She responded that since I would not talk, what was she to do? Fair enough. She will be home in an hour. So, I wait. I want to save our marriage. I wish to make up for any shortcomings that I may have had. You have a friend who can't figure out why they're single, but you know why. What's the reason? My brother-in-law is a great guy. Good looking, takes care of himself, got a good paying job and a nice house. He's never had a serious girlfriend and his family keeps murmuring about how he might be in the closet. I don't have the heart to tell him or them that it's because he eats like a goddamn starving animal. The whole family except my wife and her oldest sister, has absolutely atrocious table manners, but even then, he's by far the worst of the group. I can't imagine a young lady looking forward to a second date after watching him grunt and slurp while shoveling food into his mouth, hunched over his plate like he's trying to defend it from scavengers. Am I the a-hole for causing my sister's breakup? I've always had differences with my sister, and even though I love her, she's quite irresponsible and unpredictable in my eyes. She never finished college, and every year, she's into a new scheme. When she does get a job, it's often commission-based and short-lived. She doesn't seem to plan for the future and spends money recklessly, even when she doesn't have it. Despite all this, she's a mother of 2 boys who seem well-adjusted, despite their fathers not being in the picture. Recently, she'd been dating a guy named John for over a year. It surprised me because he wasn't her usual type, but I hoped she was maturing. John had a stable job at a bank, unlike the musicians and entrepreneurs she usually dated. He was great with her kids, and my family and friends liked him. Everything seemed perfect. Then, last month, my sister's off again fling, Alex, returned to town. Alex's visits always followed a predictable pattern. My sister would bombard the family with babysitting requests, quit or take time off her job, and drop anyone she was seeing for him. She asked me to babysit, not mentioning it was for Alex, so I agreed. But when she arrived at my place, I immediately knew. She had her hair down and wore the shortest dress she could find, which was her way of pleasing Alex. I confronted her, and although she denied it, I knew the truth. Furious, she rushed out, turned off her phone, and went MIA. After half an hour of trying to reach her, I called John in a fit of anger, not thinking clearly. I spilled everything to him, and he just thanked me and hung up. Later, I found out that John had gone to her place, caught her with Alex, walked out without saying a word, and completely ghosted her. My sister asked if I had told John, and I admitted I had. Since then, she's been hurling insults at me, blaming me for ruining her life and her kids' lives, and begging me to get in touch with John. What really weighs on me is that even our parents and mutual friends seem to think I shouldn't have told John and that I ruined a good thing for my sister. Was it really worth doing that to my nephews? I've been wrestling with my decision ever since. Am I the a-hole for asking my girlfriend to stop speaking in Spanish around me all the time? For context, my girlfriend is from Mexico, I'm white and I grew up in the US, she is my first ethnic girlfriend and I never knew that dating outside your race could come with such strong annoyances. My girlfriend and I met at a coffee shop. I asked her out after I started seeing her regularly and thought she was extremely gorgeous. I found out when we first started dating that she was an elementary school Spanish teacher. She speaks fluent Spanish and English, but the longer that we are together the more I realize that Spanish is her main language and she only speaks in English if she really needs to. At first, it really wasn't a problem, but now that we've been spending more time at each other's places I'm realizing just how serious this issue is. Whenever she is on the phone with her friends or her family she only speaks in very rapid Spanish. Even though I know these conversations have nothing to do with me I can't help but feel left out. It's just been getting to me after months and months of feeling like some idiot stranger while I'm around her as she keeps speaking in a language that I don't understand one word of. Even though I was trying to feel uncomfortable, I tried to suppress my feelings and remind myself that she is literally from Mexico and that it's natural for her to favor her native language. Yet even though I understood this I couldn't help but feel more and more annoyed as time went on. I mean, it's just irritating for her to be having a long conversation with big bursts of laughter and I have literally zero idea what the hell is going on in the conversation. I'll be completely honest, I have started having anxiety that she is speaking about me in Spanish while I'm standing right next to her, just because I literally have no idea what she's saying. Everything came to a head this week when she was on the phone with one of her friends, yet again having a long, loud conversation in Spanish and I just reached my limit of feeling left out of her life in this way. I was in a bad mood for the rest of the night and she kept asking me what was wrong but I didn't really feel ready to talk about it then. The next day I texted her and asked her to stop excluding me by continuing to only speak Spanish around me, and then she was making me feel left out of her life. All she did was text me back a bunch of question marks. I feel like she's being a smart A and invalidating my feelings with that response. I don't think I'm asking for much and I feel like my feelings are very valid and relatable. I'm going to reiterate my point tonight when we see each other in person, but I found myself wondering if other people in my position would react the same way. Again, I really don't feel like it's much to ask. All I'm asking is for her to be a more transparent and caring partner to me.
I found evidence of my husband committing an unforgivable crime. Please help. I have been destroyed since I found this evidence and I feel like my entire life has been turned upside down in 24 hours. I love my husband with all my heart, and we have had the perfect marriage up until now, but I now know the truth, he's a complete monster. My husband and I met in our early 20s, we both attended the same community college and were both alternative. As we got to know each other, we both shared our difficult high school experiences, and we learned that we both had trouble with school and authority. We had both been arrested previously. I had been taken in for shoplifting but my husband never really went into the details of why he had been arrested in his youth. Anyway, we became close and supported and encouraged each other to graduate college with high grades. We fell deeply in love, and after we graduated, he proposed to me, and we moved into a new city together. It felt like a dream. I had stability for the very first time in my life, and it felt like nothing could ever touch the perfect life we had worked so hard for. My husband was a great partner, he was very loving and kind, and even after we had been living together for a while the spark in our relationship never left. I can't stop crying as I type this. It's so painful to remember all the happy memories I have with my husband. They're all tainted now after discovering his dark secret. It's very fresh, it all happened only 48 hours ago when I was cleaning out the attic. It was a spot we had just used for storage when we first moved in. My husband and I both had a bunch of random things and when I was home alone one day I decided to organize it. I was sorting all the electronics when I found an old tape recorder from the 90s. I hadn't seen one in forever, and I wasn't sure if it was mine or my husband's since I knew I had one as well. I sat down in the attic and started watching the footage on the tape with a big goofy smile on my face, thinking I was about to uncover some old happy memories from my husband or I's teenage dirtbag days. What I ended up seeing has fully traumatized me, and every time I close my eyes, I see the horrors on the tape. I realized pretty early into the tape that it had been taken at Woodstock 99, a rock festival that had taken place in New York. That's when I knew it was my husband's recorder since I knew he had attended the festival. For context, the festival was a total disaster. It was very chaotic and overcrowded, and things got violent and dangerous as each day went on. My husband had mentioned he attended the festival, but he never really went into detail about his experience. I always thought it was because he had been scarred somehow by the mayhem. I was dead wrong. The footage was pretty normal for the most part, but as it continued, you could tell the mood of the festival was becoming unhinged. My husband and his friends were acting like barbarians on the tape. At one point, my husband was in the pit during a performance, and I saw a young topless woman with a scared look on her face standing near him. It didn't take long for her to get the attention of the crazed men around her, and the next thing I knew, I was watching this poor woman get her skirt ripped off by one of the other concertgoers. She was screaming as more men pounced on her. At this point, I was shaking and crying, but I just kept watching. My blood ran cold as I watched the woman be roped right there on the ground in the middle of the audience. It was atrocious. Men were circling her and laughing and shouting for their turn. She was surrounded by people, and no one stopped the madness to help her. I thought it couldn't get any worse until I heard my own husband behind the camera, cackling like some sort of demon. That's when he asked another guy to film while he had a go. My husband entered the frame and gave the camera a thumbs up before actually assaulting the girl himself. I couldn't hold it, and as soon as I saw that, I puked into a nearby box and started having the worst panic attack of my life. Disturbed wasn't the word. I realized in that moment that my entire life was a lie, and the man I loved was a rapist and a complete stranger. The night I found the tape, I hid it in my closet and went to sleep early after texting my husband that I wasn't feeling well. I wanted to run away as soon as I saw the tape, but I had nowhere to go, and I still didn't know what I should do next. I slept when we got home and slept in the next morning. I just couldn't bring myself to interact with him or even look at him. Just sleeping next to him in bed, knowing the truth about how evil he was terrifying. Anyway, it's been 2 days, and my husband doesn't know anything is wrong, he just thinks I'm feeling sick. I know we need to divorce, but I don't know if I'm ready. I know I should probably bring the tape to the police, but despite everything, I still love my husband, and I don't know if I could be the one to put him in jail.
What secret is so dark that you must reveal it anonymously? I know this will get a lot of hate, and yes, I deserve it. I am not looking for any validation or forgiveness. I know I am a piece of human trash. I just need to get this out. I have a brother who is 2 years older than me. He has suffered from a condition since birth that forces him to be in a wheelchair anytime he is out of bed. He cannot use his arms that well either. We used to have a great relationship until I turned 11, and I really started resenting the amount of attention he took from my parents. And how much stress he put them under. I had to constantly help him, change him, feed him. I hated it. There were a few years in his life when he was so mean to my parents, and it really made me resent him more. I realize now that I had no right to judge him, and I will never know how difficult life is for him. I stopped hanging out with him and made more friends at school. I would tell my family all the fun I was having at school during dinner to make him feel bad. I started barely talking to him or acknowledging his presence. He would get frustrated to the point of tears to get my attention. It started escalating 2 years ago when I would purposely turn off the Wi-Fi and unplug the TV every time we had to leave the house so my brother could do nothing but sit in his wheelchair. I would purposely delete his favorite saved shows on the DVR. I would make fun of his speech. Push things just out of his reach. I would act disgusted when I had to change or bathe him. It always made him feel bad, and he would apologize. I made my own brother apologize for taking a dump. What the is wrong with me? But my saint of a brother never told my parents. And he never let me have it. 3 weeks ago, he was trying to talk to me non-stop, and I was just ignoring him. I got annoyed and wheeled him against his wishes to the backyard and placed him under an umbrella and went back inside. I fell asleep and realized I left him out there for 3 hours. When I went to bring him back inside, he was in tears and wouldn't look at me. He was humiliated. I have always felt guilty about how I treated my brother all these years, but my anger towards him overpowered it. But seeing that look on his face affected me in a way that was different from before. I stopped all the bullying after that day. I couldn't even look him in the face. I was so ashamed. Last Sunday my brother told me he was glad I was his brother and friend. I couldn't even respond. I went to my room and cried. I'm crying again typing this all out. When did I become an evil trash human being? I'm 17 and he's 19 now. I know there is nothing I can do to make up for the past 6 years. My brother will be returning with my mom from a specialist appointment tonight. I'm going to apologize to him and beg for his forgiveness tonight. I want to start being a decent brother to him again. I am a healthy guy with no issues who chose to bully his only brother for something that wasn't even his fault. I am so ashamed of myself.
I divorced my husband with no explanation, but he should have already known why. The moment I discovered my husband's plan to cheat, I knew I had to leave him. I wasn't interested in hearing his excuses or accepting his apologies. Our marriage was over. Instead of confronting him, I chose to silently walk away. The decision wasn't dramatic or attention-seeking. It was a simple acceptance of the sad reality we were living. I started making arrangements, finding a new place to live and planning my exit. I found out that my husband was planning to have an affair with a woman from his company that works for another branch. He visits that branch twice a year, and she visits him twice a year. They had been flirting for 6 months, and they were going to sleep together last Friday when she was here. I sent my husband a picture of me with new lingerie about an hour before her plane landed, and he was supposed to pick her up. He had already told me he was working late and then going out with his colleagues for drinks and not to wait for him. I wrote that I was his dessert after the lobster pasta I'm making. He loves lobster pasta. He was home within the hour. When we were together, he said he was glad he chose to come home. Instead of working, you mean? I should hope so. Yeah, I mean, of course, he said. I don't have the energy to confront him or tell him that I know. I don't want to hear excuses and apologies. The lease is in his name because I moved into his apartment when we got married, and we still haven't found our home that we're saving for. So I don't need to worry about that. Our savings and joint accounts are easy to access and divide, and I can do that the day before leave. I have found a subcontract today on an apartment for 12 months. If I get picked, I can move October 1st already. Then I will serve him the papers and tell him the reason is that I'm bored with our relationship and I have fallen out of love. I think it's better that way. Update. Hi everyone. I hope you remember me. Before diving into my boring life, I want to ask you who reached out and asked for my recipe for my lobster pasta. How was it? Please share your dishes with me. I have now signed the lease. It is a sublease with 12 months, then month to month afterwards until the owner can sell his apartment. I'm so happy that I found it. I feel like I'm born again. I have felt nothing but pain and despair for weeks. Now I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm still resolute to just leave and not tell him the reason why. I think this is the only way I can cope with this pain without losing my mind or my dignity. Many asked how that would make me look. Honestly, I don't care. Those who love me unconditionally, and those who judge me, is their opinion really worth it? Update. I have been on high drive this weekend. No moving on Sundays, but I was fortunate to get the keys Thursday. I have been discreetly packing my clothes, and yesterday, Friday, the moving truck came and took all my stuff and my furniture that I bought to my new place. I changed my address to my parents because I don't want my husband to know my new address if he Googled it. When I was in my new apartment, it looked gloomy and so tiny. I just broke down crying. Like I have postponed my tears and now I could finally feel safe to be vulnerable. Around dinner, my husband started bombarding my phone because I left him a note that I was done with our marriage and filed for divorce. My plan was to never speak to him again, but today, after a million messages and missed calls, I folded and answered him. He was very confused and in total panic, but I just kept saying that I wasn't in love with him anymore and that I was bored in our marriage. He was confused and begged me to come home and explain. Then he started trying to find other solutions. Maybe I was bored with my job or with our apartment. Maybe we could move and start anew somewhere else. I couldn't hold my tongue and just said, yeah, maybe we can move to the city where the other woman lives. That would be very convenient for you. He was silent for a second, then asked what I meant. You know, because the main office is there and you have better chances to advance in your career? Silent again. Then he said, listen, I don't care about my career now. I care about you. I love you and I can't lose you. He will do anything to make me happy. I said the only thing was that he left me alone and understood that it was over, because the sooner he realized it was over the better. I hung up. I probably need a new phone number because I don't trust myself not answering him again. I was so disappointed in myself for talking to him when I decided I didn't. My parents-in-law have called and wanted an explanation, and I just said that I wasn't in love anymore and wanted an out. They're both confused. All in all, it is better than them knowing the real reasons. I'd rather have them confused than sorry for me, or worse, try to explain his behavior and ask me to forgive him. I'm way better this way. I don't think there's a need for lawyers. We don't own anything together and we don't have children. I have already taken my half of the savings, etc., and I never stood on the lease of his apartment. I see no reason to have lawyers. I already sent my divorce papers to court, and with or without his signature I will be divorced. In 6 months if he signs to. In 1 to 2 years if he refuses to sign, and I submit a new application every 6 months.
I thought she took me to the restroom to bone. I was so wrong. In college I met a girl at a house party. She was absolutely beautiful but way out of my league. However, after having enough Four Loko to incapacitate a herd of wild animals, I made my way over and introduced myself to her. We shook hands and I began dropping the loosest game on her. I was the grizzly bear, and I was about to maul her. She offered me some of her drink and I took it. We started talking about each other's courses, what our hobbies are, the casual stuff. The one thing that I found a little peculiar was the fact that it was clear this chick did not shave her armpits. However, other than that mild discrepancy, she was exactly my type, and me being lonely, I didn't mind. Besides, I like the forest. Either way, we drank and talked. Kept drinking and talking. Both are getting more and more wasted by the minute. Before I could entirely process what was happening, her tongue was so deep into my throat that King Arthur would have struggled to pull it out. I kissed back and our tongues collided in unison, merging together as the smell of alcohol infiltrated each other's taste receptors. She then asked me to the restroom with her, and winked at me. Not being an idiot, and realizing I was about to get some, I said yes without a second thought. She took me by the hand and led me away. Not only did she lead me away, she sprinted to that bathroom. That's how excited she was to have intimacy with me in the filthy college bathrooms, or so I thought. I went in first and she shut the door behind her and locked it. I was certain things were about to go to the next level. She said hang on and unzipped. She sat down on the toilet. I thought she had to pee. Then she grunted and her face vessels started popping. I heard a loud fart. Then a plop. I unlocked the door and ran. Never saw her again.
My boyfriend cheated on me, so I convinced him to get matching tattoos. I left the parlor after he got it first. This happened 5 years ago when I was 19. He was 22 at the time and the second boyfriend I've ever had. I was head over heels in love with him, but looking back he was just a good pickup artist and knew how to push my buttons, especially considering he was older and a lot more experienced than me. We had been together for almost a year when a random girl from our university DM'd me one day, "Hey, you don't know me and I am sorry to tell you this, but I've been sleeping with your boyfriend for 5 months now." He always told me he is single, but I recently got suspicious and went through his phone. I'm paraphrasing, but you get the point. I was completely heartbroken and felt like such an idiot. Now it all made sense why half of the time he was super busy and could not see me. What I was more upset about was the fact that he blatantly lied to me throughout the relationship, swearing that he is monogamous and expected the same from me, and I was. After my emotions had more or less settled, after a couple of days I invited that girl, let's call her Caitlin, to a coffee shop. She agreed to meet and tell me everything she knows. Long story short, Caitlin saw on his phone that he was dirty texting many girls, and from quickly scrolling through most of the chats, it was clear that he is screwing at least 4, me included. Caitlin said that she and the other 2 girls were just friends with benefits, but he did not mention, at least to her, that he has a girlfriend and he is cheating. Caitlin did not care about the other girls as they were treated the same way, just friends with benefits, but I was in a serious relationship with him and had no idea on what's going on. After discovering this I got extremely angry. I felt so played and manipulated. The grown-up thing to do would have been to confront him, tell him he's a jerk and just leave, but I was 19 and could not just leave it like that. I wanted to mess with his mind too. Actually, I'm not the one who came up with the matching tattoo idea, it was my best friend after I shared this story and told her I'm pissed off and want revenge. He already had plenty of tattoos on his body, so getting another one would not be something too crazy, so I thought I might actually pull this off. Next time I saw my boyfriend, I pretended like nothing had happened and acted as I'm in love with him even more. I started dropping seeds in his mind, mentioning that I'm really thinking about getting my first tattoo, maybe even his name, etc., which he loved by the way. His ego was getting more than he could handle. Long story short, in about 2 weeks we ended up going to a tattoo parlor. My best friend secretly waited nearby in her car and I told her to pick me up as soon as she sees me step outside of the shop. My plan was this. Go there, act a bit scared and do a good old switcheroo, play with his ego to put him on the spot. I framed it something along the lines of I really want to do it, but I'm a scared little girl. Oh my gosh, we're actually doing this, is it going to hurt? I need a big, strong man to show me first, etc. And guess what? It worked like a charm. Did not take too long for him to go first and get my name tattooed on the side of his ribs, with I'm a big, strong, cool guy smirk on his face. As soon as the tattoo was finished, I just casually left the parlor saying I know you've been cheating on me dum-dum. He was about to run after me, but the tattoo artist stopped him because he needed to pay. The timing was just perfect. My friend parks in front of the shop, I jump in the car and as we are leaving my boyfriend runs out and sees us driving off with my middle finger in the car window. I blocked him, gave him zero closure, ignored all of his attempts to reach out. Was this too ruthless? Maybe. Childish? 100%. Do I regret it? Nope. He probably got the tattoo covered with something else as soon as he could, but just knowing that I made him do that made me feel warm and fuzzy inside. My husband asked for a paternity test, it came back positive, but our relationship was never the same. My 24 female, husband, 31 male, and I have 3 children. Our sons look exactly like him, dark skin and dark eyes and hair, but our daughter doesn't. She looks exactly like my great-grandparents, really pale, blonde and green-eyed, but apparently he didn't think it was possible that our daughter could look like my great-grandparents, and from the moment he saw her he told me he wanted a paternity test. At first I refused because I felt it was humiliating and because I didn't think it was necessary, because I never cheated on him and I hoped he would trust me, but he didn't, and for the first 2 months of our daughter's life he made my life hell. He didn't want to hold her even if she cried desperately while I was doing something else. He never woke up at night to help me with her. He never helped me with anything, and that hurt me so much because with our boys he was completely different. He helped me all the time with absolutely everything and he was always there for me after giving birth, but this time he left me alone and it was the worst experience of my life. I have no family here and his entire family from the moment they saw my daughter turned their backs on me. I don't have any friends here either, so it was just my daughter and me. She is a colicky baby, so it was very difficult for me to do everything alone and on top of that help with our sons. I decided to do the paternity test because one day his entire family came to our house to celebrate my son's birthday and no one spoke to me, and they didn't want to include my daughter in the photos that my in-laws took of all the grandchildren, so I knew it was stupid to keep waiting for them to come to their senses. Well, the paternity test came back positive and everyone was shocked, and of course they felt guilty for not having believed in me. Everyone apologized and my husband even cried when he held our daughter in his arms for the first time, and I know that his apologies were genuine and that's why I forgave him. But I don't know if I can forgive his family. They treated me really badly and said horrible things about me just a few days after giving birth, and I can't forget their insults or violence. My husband knows that I don't want to see his family, nor do I want them near any of our children, and he told his family, so these last 3 months it has been just the 5 of us, but it doesn't feel as good as I expected. My husband is constantly apologizing and crying every time he holds our daughter, and I'm getting tired of this situation. I want us to be happy as we were before, so how can we move on? My husband suggested that we should start couples therapy. How much can therapy help?
My girlfriend won the lottery, but she is refusing to share the money with me. I might come off as entitled, but I feel like anyone in the same situation would share such a life-changing amount of money with their partner. I really don't think I'm crazy for expecting that my girlfriend would be caring enough to include me in this achievement in her life, but I guess I was an idiot to think so. My girlfriend and I are both in our early 20s, she works full-time and attends college online, and I currently work a part-time job. I have some mental health issues that make it hard for me to hold a job down for very long. To be honest, we were struggling a bit for the past 2 years because I couldn't hold jobs down for more than a month. Despite this, I've been at my current job for about 3 months now, and I've been proud of myself for managing my mental health issues to be able to stay employed. As happy as I am to be able to share the bills with my girlfriend again, I still hate my job, and my manager is constantly pissing me off. Anyway, ever since I've known her, my girlfriend has played the lottery on a weekly basis. I am not a superstitious person, so I always made fun of her for wasting money on something like the lottery, since there was such a slim chance she would ever win. My girlfriend ignored my judgments and kept buying lottery tickets on a regular basis, so I was totally amazed when she called me at work the other day crying, telling me she had won $10,000 on a scratch-off ticket. I spent a minute on the phone with her, congratulating her and telling her how happy I was before we made dinner plans to celebrate that night and said goodbye. After speaking with my girlfriend, I walked back in from my break and right into my boss's office. I cursed him out for all the times he's ever pushed me around and quit right there on the spot. I felt on top of the world, but leave it to my girlfriend to ruin all my hopes just a few hours later. After quitting, I drove from my workplace to the mall since I had a couple of hours to kill before my girlfriend would be home from work and we could go out to dinner. I bought my girlfriend a huge bouquet of flowers, and I bought myself a nice watch that I had been wanting for years. When both my girlfriend and I got home, I gave her the flowers, and we celebrated her winnings together for a couple of minutes before going out. As soon as we sat down for dinner, I surprised her with the news that I had quit, and I asked her if we should take a vacation together with the lottery money. I thought we were about to have a great dinner where we made a bunch of fun plans because we had the funds for a different lifestyle now, but my girlfriend pooped all over my happy mood just minutes into the conversation. I was rambling excitedly for a bit about potential vacation spots I had always wanted to go to, and I thought my girlfriend would chime in with her own, but she just gave me this confused stare. Eventually, I asked her what was wrong, and she said she had put the lottery money into a savings account. She revealed that she wanted to use it to start saving for a house. I asked her if she was serious, and I said she couldn't be dumb enough just to ignore a huge amount of money like that. This is when she started to get upset. Her voice got quieter as she explained that it was a lot of money but she still needed to finish her degree, and this money didn't change that. She said achieving the stability of having a degree and buying a house were her immediate goals, not expensive vacations. The more she spoke, the angrier I felt. I knew the money wasn't mine, but we were supposed to be life partners, and I felt like she wasn't thinking about me at all since she won the ticket. She asked me why I had quit my job so fast, and I said it was because I assumed she cared about me, but I guess I was wrong. I just can't believe she would betray me like this, and I don't see why she needed to save all of the money. I told her that she should have told me all this over the phone when she first called me, and that she was effed up for getting my hopes up in the first place. She just sort of stopped talking. She didn't even say sorry. It was awkward, but I was still more mad than anything. That's when I told her about the watch, and I said that she should really pay for that at least. Since she knew I couldn't afford it and I only bought it because she had told me about her ticket. She looked at me and asked if I was serious, and I said yes, it's the least you can do. She just sort of laughed in my face, and walked out of the restaurant. I'm typing this as I wait for an Uber since she took our car home, literally abandoning me here at the restaurant on top of everything she did today. When I get home, I'm going to demand an apology for all the bullshit she put me through today, and if she can't give me that, I'll have serious doubts about this relationship. This is why the Israel-Palestine situation will have more of an effect than you think. Because the current Israel-Palestine conflict will have a turmoil snowball effect on other wars and conflicts happening around the globe. Think of it this way, while many countries and committees spend their time trying to decide justice and whom to allocate money to, that is time lost for help in the Ukraine-Russia war. This will cause thousands more to die while the battle is postponed. Moreover, Iran will have to join in this conflict, which will immensely change the grounds and possibility for Azerbaijan to try and take over Armenia. Already Azerbaijanis have unrightfully stepped foot and taken claim on Armenian ground, but without a local partner, and more attention going to another war, the effects could be disastrous. There is much worse that can happen though, but before we can talk about the future effects we have to understand the history, so here it is. The Jews had lived in ancient Israel until various empires conquered and expelled them. Each time they were allowed to return. The last iteration of that was the Roman Empire, which first started to conquer the province of Judea in 63 BC. The Jews had a belief that there was only one God, Yahweh, and that to worship any other god was a sin. The Romans had a political practice to impose the Roman emperor as a god to worship. For the other regions they conquered where the people there believed in multiple gods, this wasn't too big of an issue. However, I'm sure you can see why this is an issue for the Jews. Tensions kept rising. The Jews fought several wars of independence, which partially received renewed vigor through Jesus' preachings and activities, but the Jews didn't have a chance against the mighty Roman Empire. Eventually the Romans got fed up and started to expel the Jews from Judea, a process that took the span of several decades starting roughly in 100 AD. This was the final time it happened. During medieval times, fast forward to the 600s AD. In the Arabian Peninsula, the Prophet Muhammad receives a vision from God and founds the religion of Islam. Over the course of the following decades, the Arabs conquer vast swathes of North Africa and the Middle East, slowly converting these populations to Islam and Arabizing their cultures and peoples. We have three religions that now share the same root. They trace back their spiritual lineage to Abraham, a key religious figure in the Torah, the Bible, and the Quran. Meanwhile, Jews living in the now Christian kingdoms of Europe are excluded from many professions and crowded into small corners of cities called ghettos or plots of undesirable rural land called shtetls. At best they would be tolerated, at worst they would be expelled and massacred. In the 1600s, two large Jewish populations eventually made their way to two places, the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, or the area of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, modern-day Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, and the Baltics. These Jews are called the Sephardic and Ashkenazim Jews respectively. There are also Mizrahi Jews in the Muslim world that experience similar treatment. They'd sometimes be accepted and sometimes would be persecuted. Industrial era. After the French Revolution and the defeat of Napoleon in 1815, Europe started to experience a surge in nationalist movements. No longer were people subjects of a king, they now saw themselves as citizens of a country. But this also meant that many people saw that their countries were only for their own people. France was only for the French, Russia was only for the Russians, etc. Anti-Semitism and hatred against Jews intensified during this time, especially in the former Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which had been split between Russia, Austria, and Prussia, the predecessor state to Germany. In France there was the Dreyfus Affair, in which a French Jewish army officer was wrongly accused of treason and put on trial. In Russia, the Jews that lived in Eastern Europe were routinely expelled by the Russian Tsars, in which the Russian secret police would go to select villages and towns to terrorize the Jewish populations there and expel them in events known as pogroms. A lot of Jews, especially Ashkenazim Jews, immigrated to the US, Britain and its colonies, or Latin America to escape persecution. However, one Jew named Theodor Herzl had an idea: instead of being outsiders in a country constantly at the majority's mercy, what if the Jews had their own country? What if they could reclaim the promised land of Judea that had been taken from them so long ago? In the 1880s, he forms a movement to return to the Promised Land, Zionism, and organizes voyages and settling expeditions to Judea, called Aliyahs, now the province of Palestine in the Ottoman Empire. At first, this wasn't an issue. But as more Jews came, and as the Arabs also had nationalist movements to establish a free nation from the rule of the Ottoman Turks, the Arabs and Jews started to slowly come to a head. The World Wars. The Ottoman Empire joins World War I in 1915 on the side of Germany, Central Powers, who are fighting the UK, France, and Russia, the Entente. Britain owns Egypt at this time, so a war front begins there. The British and French start sponsoring an Arab rebellion against the Ottomans. The Entente powers promise the Arabs that they will have their own country if the Entente wins the war. The Central Powers lose the war and the Ottoman Empire is carved up in a peace treaty. However, the British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour makes a public declaration in 1917 that Britain would support a Jewish state in Palestine. The British and French also have a secret agreement called the Sykes-Picot Agreement, in which they would divide the Ottoman territories of the Middle East amongst themselves. The British essentially promised Palestine to the Arabs, the Jews, and themselves, making a promise they couldn't keep. The Arabs are understandably pissed and feel betrayed. They start launching a rebellion against the British and the French, but this rebellion is crushed. Meanwhile, Jews hear the Balfour Declaration and are excited to believe that the British support their claim to the Promised Land, so they start immigrating to the now British Mandate of Palestine in large numbers. This is especially important since the US, Brazil, and many other countries start closing off their countries to Jewish immigration. The Arabs see this as a colonialist ploy to replace the Arab population in Palestine with a loyal Jewish population, and so start fighting with the Jews that are settling in Palestine. Multiple violent conflicts break out over the 1920s and 1930s, heightened by both Jews and Arabs forming their own militias. In 1936, the violence in Palestine is too much for the British to handle, so they close off Palestine to further Jewish immigration to appease the Arabs. At the same time, Germany has elected the Nazis into power. Nazi Germany starts World War II and starts conquering vast swathes of Europe. Jews are desperately trying to flee, but no country will take them and Jewish refugees are sometimes deported back into Nazi hands. When the Nazis invade the Soviet Union and conquer vast portions of Eastern Europe, they suddenly control land where many Jews live and decide to implement the Holocaust in full. Eventually, Nazi Germany is defeated, but the Nuremberg trials display these crimes for the world to see. However, the Jews are convinced that Europe will never accept them, especially since pogroms are still happening in Europe after the war. So now that we know that we can clearly see that this isn't very black and white, obviously this attack from Israel has unalived people and therefore cannot be characterized as anything but wrong. However, we can't decisively make wrong or right claims because it is a very complicated situation. What do you think? I'm debating on telling my brother whose wife recently died that his daughters are biologically mine. My brother Richard's wife Sarah recently passed away from cancer and he's absolutely devastated. At the moment, he doesn't want to see or speak to anyone, only his daughters. He has twin daughters that are 12 years old and they're absolutely wonderful girls. The thing is, I'm actually the true biological father of those girls. Sarah had an affair with me shortly after they had gotten married. This lasted 4 months and I'll even say those months with Sarah were amazing. My brother Richard, who now owns his own sports bar, was helping his best friend with his own bar at the time. While Richard was away, Sarah and I became much more closer and comfortable together. We went to Vegas for the first time, traveled everywhere together and cared for each other in ways we never expected. There was plenty of unprotected intimacy with her during these 4 months, which obviously led to the twins being born. Sarah was a beautiful, sweet and incredible person. So silly and hilarious, someone you really wanted to spend time with. She'll light an entire room up with her smile alone. I'm not sure why we did what we did, but what's done is done. I'm not going to say I didn't enjoy it, because I loved the time I spent with her. We just so happened to be alone for a certain time at that moment. We became friendly and very close, things happened unexpectedly. I'm not going to debate with you all if Sarah and I are assholes for having an affair. We know what we did was wrong, but at the time it felt absolutely right and we didn't care about the consequences. Eventually she did get pregnant and around the same time Richard returned. I got DNA tested to see if I was the father, which I obviously was, and everything came back positive. But what happened next was unbelievable. I'm debating on telling my brother whose wife recently died that his daughters are biologically mine. So Sarah used the time my brother returned back home as the reason she got pregnant. I assumed they had intimacy and Sarah used that as the reason for her pregnancy. We had a mutual agreement that we were never going to tell Richard what happened as it would devastate him. As the twins grew up, they began to look more and more like me. I don't think Richard ever clued in. Richard loves the twins so much, it's beautiful to see. He actually teared up when Sarah announced she was pregnant. He really wanted to be a father so badly and he finally was. He's a wonderful father and the twins are very attached to him. I don't blame them, he's a really fun and sweet man and I'm sure the two girls feel very loved and safe with him. When Sarah got cancer, Richard was obviously devastated. Near the end of her illness, Sarah told me that eventually she would like Richard and the girls to know what happened between us. She made me promise to tell them. I promised her that I would just to give her some peace. She passed away last month. I still have not told Richard and I don't think I ever will. He has been hyper-depressed since Sarah died and telling him this would just devastate him, let alone ruin our relationship. His daughters are the only people that are with him, they're super strong girls loving and are comforting their father through all of this. For 12-year-olds, they're very strong and it definitely shows how strong the bond is between the three of them. For all practical reasons, the twins are his daughters. He is the one that has raised them and neither of them know any different. Especially since Sarah died, I think it would just be cruel to tell him that his daughter's not even biologically his. On the other hand, I did promise Sarah that I would tell him the truth. I know I personally would want to know the truth if I was in Richard's position. But that's just me. I wouldn't want to break his heart again. He's gone through so much. I don't know if it would be better for this to be out in the open or not. Attorneys, what was your most satisfying case? In 1973, my parents had enough money to build a little ranch house in the country. The small bank in town approved the mortgage and the bank signed a contract to give Bob the money to build the house. Bob, as it turns out, was overbooking himself all over town, leaving his clueless minions to do the actual work. The build took longer and longer, with more and more work having to be ripped out and redone. We're not talking about using the wrong color paint or nailing up some wonky trim, here. The architect forgot to fully erase a line on the blueprints and the framers built a wall through the bathtub. My mother was told don't put anything heavy in the kitchen cabinets because they were attached to the drywall, not the studs, using a few roofing nails through the back of each cabinet. The garage door opening was framed into the living room instead of towards the driveway. And so on. When the bank's representative showed up for the final inspection, my parents met him in the front yard and refused to sign off on Bob's work. Then the representative became angry, as the bank had paid Bob a lot of money. He strode to the front door and pulled on the doorknob, whereupon the entire door, casing included, fell on him. It had simply been wedged, not nailed, into place. The bank called Bob, who finally showed up to supervise the work himself. The only problem was that Bob wasn't any better at building a house than his minions were. My parents still refused to sign off on the house. My mother was a stay-at-home mom in a nasty rental with 2 tiny children while my dad was working 2 jobs while this was going on. Throughout the entire process, the bank and Bob treated them very poorly, bullying my mom and lying to my dad. What should have been an exciting time for my parents was ruined. My mom cried a lot. My dad got depressed. Finally, the bank threatened my parents with foreclosure and Bob threatened to sue my parents for breach of contract because the bank refused to pay him any more money. So my exhausted parents went to an attorney and gave him the rundown. Plumbing, electrical, tiling issues, the whole sorry mess. My parents were scared. All they had was their small down payment savings, so if this became a lengthy court battle the bank and Bob would win. The attorney, Tom, was kind, but my dad said he could tell that he and Mom were doomed from Tom's facial expressions as he sorted through the paperwork. Then, abruptly, Tom smiled. "Let's get everyone together for a meeting," he told my parents. "Tomorrow." So my parents, Tom, the bank's representative, the bank's attorney, Bob, and Bob's attorney met at the bank. Tom didn't give anyone else time to begin. He said, "Well, my clients have decided that they no longer want this house. Please remove it." Everyone else started to laugh. "Remove it? Have you lost your mind?" Tom, in a sweeping, theatrical gesture, placed a deed on the table. "My clients own the land the house is sitting on outright. They no longer want the house. Get the house off my client's land." Bob's attorney stared at the deed, and then turned and stared at Bob. "You built a house on land you don't own?" Bob nodded. The bank's attorney started yelling at the bank's representative. "You didn't finance the land the house is on?" The representative stammered, No?" Tom said firmly, "As I said, gentlemen, you're trespassing on my client's land. I expect the house to be removed and the land returned to its original state, at once." My dad said he'll remember the blank looks everyone on the other side of the table passed to one another for his whole life. Sure, the bank could foreclose on a house that wouldn't exist by the end of the week, with no way to recoup the money. They didn't even own the land it was on. Bob was out the 50% he'd paid out of pocket, plus he was on the hook for tearing down the house and removing it. On top of that, the bank would undoubtedly want him to repay the initial 50% they'd given him. Could they have gone after my parents? Sure. A foreclosure would have meant bad credit for my parents moving forward. They might lose their down payment. But to sign off on the house in its condition at that time would have meant thousands and thousands of dollars in cash to replace/repair everything from the roof to the basement before the house could be safely lived in. The bank knew my parents didn't have that kind of money, they're the ones who approved the mortgage. Suddenly, my parents were good people, it was all such a misunderstanding, and the bank and Bob couldn't do enough for them. The house was brought in line with the original blueprints and specifications immediately, at no extra cost to my parents, but at considerable cost to Bob. My parents signed the mortgage. Bob got the rest of his money, and just about broke even on the build. The bank's representative was fired. And Tom, attorney extraordinaire, got a stinging tale of triumph to recall to fellow attorneys for the rest of his life.
What is the most down bad thing you have ever done for money? I was contacted by an old man through Instagram asking me to be a live and house pet in exchange for a nice amount of money. I had recently graduated high school and got kicked out of my parents, so I really needed it. I agreed to be his live and pet. I thought it was going to be a sugar baby and sugar daddy situation when I went over to live with him, but I was completely wrong. This old man paid me $20,000 a month as long as I spent every waking second dressed as a cat. I had to walk on all four and eat from a bowl. I was not allowed to talk to him, and had to meow when I was signaling that I wanted something. It was only after he went to sleep that I could take my very realistic cat suit he had bought for me off and relax. He was an early sleeper and would crash around 9 p.m. every day, meaning I had a few hours to myself. He never even wanted intimacy, we did not do it once. He simply wanted me to act like a cat and wear cat's clothing, including paws on my feet and hands. He would kiss and snuggle these paws, however, which I found very strange. I stayed at this house for close to a year racking up money. I never had to pay for a single thing, and for the most part, he was not a weird guy. He never made unwanted advances and he gave me every single Sunday off, where I would not have to pretend to be a cat. During Sundays, he would take me to go shopping or order a very fancy dinner for us to have delivered. I literally racked up over $200,000 in 1 year by pretending to be a cat. I would have planned to stay longer, but he had a heart attack and told me he could no longer keep me around as he wanted his family to come over and stay with him in the aftermath. I had met his brother before who approved of the cat thing, and I actually banged his brother. It was more so his mother and father he was worried about disapproving. What is your biggest regret? So I have a best friend named Jay who's also my schoolmate and classmate. We are both 16 and live in the same residential area. A little description of Jay. He's tall, handsome, athletic, fit, smart, funny and sweet. He even has good hair and the most beautiful eyes. Jay and I had been friends from kindergarten up till high school. When we were in primary school he confessed feelings many times, but I only considered him a friend. I never saw him to be as handsome and amazing as everyone else did, because I saw him almost all the time of my life. About a month and a half ago, Jay once again confessed to me. This time he did it more maturely and more in a sweet way that I actually felt butterflies in my stomach. But I wasn't sure I felt the same. His confession did really make me think of it, but I really valued our friendship more and I didn't think I felt anything for Jay. So once again I rejected him in a way I regret to this day. I laughed and said, "So I'm still your little obsession? Grow up and move on already, Jay." His face after I said that made me regret my words. He didn't laugh like I did. It seemed like he was fighting back tears. I honestly didn't think he was being 100% serious, because he would always say how he will confess 100 times a week to wait for me to say yes. Jay just walked away and left. He didn't come to school the next day. He didn't come outside when I went to call him to walk together to school. He ignored my calls and texts, and when he did see them, he never responded. At first I was angry at him. Why was he taking rejection so seriously? I already rejected him enough times for him to get used to it. That's what I thought then. But the more I didn't get the notification of his text, his random FaceTimes, the goofy TikToks he'd send me, it started to weigh on me. I had made so many tries to text him when I finally sent him an apology paragraph, but it was then I found out he blocked me. He came back to school after missing 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks I thought of him always. Our desks were together, so I'd zone out while staring at his desk. One of my friends even told me I might have fallen for Jay, but I denied it. I denied it until I saw him when he came back. Jay looked like a whole different person. He had dyed his blonde hair jet black and had gotten an amazing haircut. His aura completely changed as soon as he entered the class. Everyone looked at him and I did too. He sat down at his desk and didn't even turn to look at me. Everyone came and showered him with compliments about his good haircut, and he suddenly had the most charming smile as he thanked everyone. Well, everyone but me. I turned to him with a happy smile and said, "Black hair really suits you well. You look so handsome." But he ignored me and continued to speak to this other guy who even stopped talking so Jay would react to my comment, but Jay did nothing. He ignored me the whole morning, and when our homeroom teacher came he asked to switch seats but was denied. He ignored me and hung out with the people he knew I didn't like. He always walked away when I tried to talk to him. I had actually come to accept that I liked him back. I even asked my friends and my sister and even my mom if feeling certain ways after he left meant I liked him, and my mom said, "Maybe he just needed to leave for you to realize how much you care for him." My friends and sister said the same. I decided to go and tell him the day after he returned. I didn't get the chance in the morning because he went to his new friends, and when I tried to talk to him he went away. I felt so bad that I went crying in the girls' bathroom. I regretted it. I regretted it so much. I wished I had just accepted his feelings then and tried to see if I'd fall for him with time. I shouldn't have waited this long. He ignored me completely and acted like we were never even friends for the rest of the days that followed. I had enough of it though. Since he had me blocked everywhere, I took my sister's phone and sent him a long message confessing my feelings, apologizing and asking him if we could be friends again, and telling him how much I missed him. I begged him to talk to me and really hoped he would see it. He told me to meet him after school the next day. When I went to meet him, he was standing with the most beautiful girl I've ever seen. My heart dropped and I fell to my knees. MF, slept in my roommate's bed and got effed. For context, we're best friends who live together and sometimes sleep together. I'm basically free use for him. I couldn't sleep a few nights ago, so I went into his room to hang out. We were just watching TV and showing each other memes. Then I started to fall asleep and asked if I could just stay there. This happens occasionally, so of course he didn't care. I left my shirt on, but took my pants off to get more comfortable. We were under the same blanket, but he had his pants on and shirt off. He was on his back and I was on my side with my SS facing him. Finally he took his pants off and I started to get a churny feeling our bodies touching. I may have started pushing my SS back into him a little, it always works lol, and then he grabbed my hand and put it on his PP. I don't know why, but facing away from him and teasing his PP and balls was so hot to me. Maybe like a little sensory deprivation because I couldn't see it. I don't know. I could feel him start to leak precam all over my hand and he wrapped his arms around me and was playing with my nipples while grunting into the back of my neck and desperately trying to F my hand. I reached between my legs so I could make the handjob really wet and then grabbed his hand and put it between my legs. He started fingering me and made me CM so effing hard while he slid his PP between my SS cheeks and was rubbing against me. I couldn't take it anymore so I put him on his back and got between his knees to give him head. After a few minutes of playing with his balls and sucking his PP, he told me to get on top. Riding him is my absolute favorite, plus it makes him CM so hard and fast. Unfortunately I'm not on birth control at the moment so he pushed me off after only a minute or two and I jerked him off again to finish him. He came on my face and I sucked him clean until he pushed me off again lol. Fell asleep on his chest with CM on my cheek, smiley face.